Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to stand this way so I can open out a little. There we go. I just want to be able to give them a little.
Sailing across the Atlantic, European explorers see a new world, a new land, a new page in history. In the age of exploration, Prince Henry of Portugal began the school of navigation. He sent ships to Asia, but didn't reach his destination. Then Christopher Columbus sailed in 1492. He thought he had reached India across the ocean blue, but he was in the Bahamas, and no one actually knew. Magellan in 1519 circumnavigated the earth. He took 5 ships on a 3-year trip. He sailed through a strait that later bore his name. Magellan had big plans for his guys, but only 18 men and 1 ship survived. The century of 1500 was called the Spanish Conquest, greedy for gold and glory. Cortez conquered the Aztecs, but Ponce de Leon searched the land of flowers to find a fountain with magical powers. The Spanish conquistadors took command. South and Central America was now their land. Northeast explorers want no trouble with Spain. They sailed north, Cabot, Cartier, and Champlain. 1497, Cabot is hunted by England's king and reaches North America, but thinks it's no big thing. Cartier and Champlain continue to explore rivers, coasts, and islands just above New York. Sailing across the Atlantic, European explorers see a new world, a new land, a new age in history. Raleigh sent settlers to Roanoke in 1585. John White returns to England to get more supplies. But when he gets back to Roanoke, what does he find? No people, no colony, only 2 signs. The gentleman settled Jamestown in 1607, but starvation and disease take many to heaven. In 1620, Pilgrims voyage across the sea to have freedom of religion and escape English mockery. Trusting God's providence and settle at Plymouth Plantation, they're helped by Squanto and the Wampanoag Indian Nation. They celebrate Thanksgiving in 1621 with 3 days of praise, feasting, and fun. The Puritans in 1630 sails the New World in spring, seeking religious freedom with their charter from the King. Settle Massachusetts Bay, a new colony, a new home. The Puritans make new laws and govern on their own. Williams, a minister, strongly disagrees with some of the Puritan ideas and policies. So in 1636, he starts a colony of his own. Rhode Island, where religious tolerance is shown. Sailing across the Atlantic, European settlers see a new world, a new land, a new page in history.
This is just my nickname, which means playful one. My real name is Amanut. Later in life, I got married and take the name Rebecca Bell. I grew up in Jamestown, Virginia. I was around 10 when the English settlers arrived in 1607. Last month, their leader was almost killed by my father. I saved his life. I did not marry John Smith, as the Disney movie may lead you to believe. I married John Rolfe, an English tobacco farmer. This brought the peace between 2 groups of people known as the Peace of Pocahontas. Even though I lived a short life, I left an impact on history by taking a bad decision and making something good out of it. Because I was brave and kind.
Hi, my name is Mary Dyer. You might wonder who I am. Well, I'm a woman who died a martyr for my religious beliefs. My last words for my religious beliefs were, "Nay, I cannot, for in obedience to the will of the Lord God. I came in his will, I abide faithful to death." This quote shows that even death, I would never give up my beliefs. I was born in Somershire, England in 1611. I was originally a faithful Puritan and born in a Puritan family. I could read and write, and back then they called it boy work. My education was about Puritan religious studies, which led me to disagree with Puritan laws. When I was reading about Puritan views, teachings that are saved by works, I disagreed and decided to become a Quaker. I believe we are saved by God's grace. My husband also became a Quaker. I work with Ann Hutchinson as missionary on behalf of Quakers. I helped end the persecution of Quakers because during that time, some Puritans believed that Quakers were witches. I died on June 1st, 1660, by getting hanged with 4 other people. All of my accomplishments were based on my strong religious values. I wanted freedom of religion, women to be treated equally to men, and peaceful relations between Puritans and Quakers. I know the Puritans wanted to live purely and please God. I even stated that I would forgive them before I died. Today I am honored and remembered for my courage. A statue of me stands at the state capitol in Massachusetts.
Hi, my name is Anne Bradstreet. However, my maiden name was Anne Dudley. I was born in 1612 in Northampton, England, to a Puritan family. I was the daughter of Thomas Dudley, a soldier for Queen Elizabeth, and later a caretaker for a large English estate. Here I had access to an extensive library that I read from. I did not attend school, but my father gave me an awesome homeschool education. I was the first poet in the North American colonies to be published. I was actually inspired by William Shakespeare, and reading his work led me to love poetry. When I was 18, I got married to Samuel Bradstreet, yet we continued to be involved in my parents' lives. When I was 18, my husband, my mother, my father, and myself sailed to America with the Puritans on the ship called the Arabella. We were an important family in the new colony. I was a poet who wrote a collection of fascinating poems. Most of my poems were focused on political or societal ideas, and the last few poems were about my family or private life. I was a mother of a wife, a hostess, and a poet. My brother-in-law, in my honor, published my poems as a book called The 10th Muse Lately Sprung Up in America. I'm still considered as one of the most early poets in history. The most important thing in my life was my love for the Lord. I wrote this in a letter to my children. Among all my experiences of God's gracious dealings with me, I have constantly observed this, that he hath never suffered me long to sit loose from him, but by one affliction or other, hath made me look home and see what was amiss. My best poems and most well-known poems are about birth, children, the death of grandchildren, my love for my husband, my son's departure for England, my own illnesses and adversities. Here's an example of one of my poems. To my dear and loving husband. If ever two were one, then surely we. If ever man were loved by wife than me. If ever wife was happy in a man, compare with me, ye woman, if you can. I prize I love more than whole mines of gold, or all the riches that the east doth hold. My love is such that rivers cannot quench, or know aught but love from thee give recompense. Thy love is such I can no way repay. The heavens reward thee manifold, I pray. Then while we live in love that's so persevered, then when we live, no more we may live ever. Poems like these are I in Bradstreet and remembered today in history and literature books. From 1607 to 1733, America settled 13 colonies. People came to America for 3 main reasons: religious freedom, political freedom, and economic opportunity. That means a way to make money.
Colonies under British rule before the USA that we know today. 13 colonies under British rule, divided into 3 regions. We'll break it down for you. All New England colonies together there were 4: Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Rocky soil kept farms small, the sea was there nearby. They built the ships that sailed the sea to help the economy. 13 colonies under British rule for the USA that we know today. 13 colonies. from Maryland. Tobacco, rice, indigo, plantations big and small. 13 colonies there where we broke it down for you.
1740 through 1742, the First Great Awakening, a religious revival broke. My name is Jonathan Edwards. I am rarely mentioned in history books. However, did you know I was one of the smartest men of my day? President of Princeton University and ignited the First Great Awakening. I was born on October 5th, 1703 in East Windsor, Connecticut. I was the only son out of 11 children born to Timothy and Esther Edwards. After being homeschooled by my mother, I went to Yale University at age 13, having mastered Greek, Hebrew, and Latin. After graduating valedictorian in my class at Yale, I married Sarah Pierpont and pastored at Northampton Church in Massachusetts. Getting the chance to preach the Word of God brought great excitement to me and confirmed God's calling on my life. I had many accomplishments in my life in spite of several hardships. One of my greatest achievements was raising 11 disciplined and intelligent children alongside my wife Sarah. Pastoring for 23 years at the same church in Northampton was another great feat for this devoted pastor. However, after many years of serving the church, I was fired from my belief that it is only right to take the Lord's Supper if you have openly declared a saving faith in Jesus. After being fired, I was a missionary to the Housatonic Indians for too little pay to feed my family. 6 months before dying of smallpox, I achieved the role of president at Princeton University, one of the finest colleges of my day. I am most remembered for working alongside George Whitefield and John Wesley to spread the revival fires of the First Great Awakening to all the North American British colonies. My most famous sermon was Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God that I preached when the entire town of Enfield was converted. Many of my sermons were so powerful, people would cry out and shake, for they realized for the first time that we are sinful, God is perfect, yet we can still be saved through God's amazing grace. I was an example for theologians to come because I held to biblical standards and worked tirelessly to preach the gospel to everyone I could. Much of my success in preaching I owe to my parents for teaching me the Bible at a young age. God used my preaching to call many of the colonists to return to a biblical worldview, which later contributed to the strong Christian foundation of the United States of America.
During the 1750s, the colonies traded with England, but the Navigation Act placed by the king controlled colonial commerce and caused tensions to keep rising. The French-Indian War began in 1754 between the British and French. They fought over land. The colonies gave the British a hand, while most of the Indians helped the French make a stand.
In 1763, the British had victory, but were left with a huge war debt, and looked to the Americans to get them out of it. British Parliament acted unjustly, and many unfair taxes were imposed, but the colonists protested, and a rebellion arose. They agreed,
Taxation without representation is tyranny.
We demand to be heard. Demand to be free.
So in 1774, they tried once more to seek peace with Britain and avoid all-out war. The Declaration of Rights and Grievances was sent to King George. Meanwhile, they boycotted British goods, yet they were still ignored. So British blockaded Boston Harbor in 1775 and attempted to capture American guns and supplies. Patriots and Sons of Liberty were keeping track. Paul Revere would help alert if the British planned to attack.
Hello, my name is Paul Revere. Do you know about my ride to warn Lexington and Concord? You most likely do, but do you know I'm also a dentist? I, an important patriot, was born on January 1st, 1735 in Boston, Massachusetts. I was the third of 12 children. I had an interesting young adult life. I fought in the French and Indian War, briefly. I was also a silversmith and a dentist, operating out of Boston in the 1760s. Did you know I carved the Boston Massacre Did you know I carved the Boston Massacre scene out of copper? I was also a son of liberty. I, too, rode to Concord and Lexington to warn of the coming British redcoats. I also had 16 children. I unfortunately died on May 10th, 1818, at the age of 83. My house still stands at 19 North Square, Boston, Massachusetts. Without me, we might not have the USA today.
Hi, I am Sybil Williamson. I was born in Fredericksburg, New York on April 5th, 1761. My father served in the French and Indian War, and I followed in his footsteps and helped out in the Revolutionary War. When the war began, my father became a patriot. I was known as the female Paul Revere for the midnight ride to warn the people in Danbury, Connecticut, that the British were going to take over. By doing this brave deed, I saved many people and was considered a hero. After I went on the midnight ride, George Washington came to honor my brave deed. Anne von Huntington sculpted a bronze statue of me in 1960. When I died, I was buried in Paterson, New York, at the same cemetery as my father, a place where two heroic souls laid to rest.
Hello, my name is Deborah Sampson Gannett. Did you know I was the first American woman to ever go to war? I used the alias Robert Shirtlift, was able to become a soldier, and fought in the American Revolution. The reason I did this was to save one or both of my brothers from becoming a soldier and having a chance of dying. I was born in 1766, spent most of my childhood in Clinton, Massachusetts, and had a very hard childhood. When I was born, I had two brothers and two sisters. Sadly, when I was 5, my father left me and my family. Because my family was not wealthy, I had to become a maid at the age of 8. I also became a slave who wasn't allowed to go to school when I was 10. Since I was not allowed to go to school, I made treats for the boys who went to school in exchange for what they learned. Later on, I worked hard to become a highly skilled weaver. I worked for Sproat Tavern, Warren, Morton, and Leonard families. After trying to get into the army as Timothy Thayer, I got in as Robert Shirtlift. An accomplishment for me was being the first woman to ever get an award for giving out public lectures. Another accomplishment that was an important job for me was being General Patterson's aide. Later on, in 1783, I became ill in Philadelphia. Soon, a doctor named Dr. Barnabas Finney helped me win honorable discharge. Suddenly, they discovered I was a woman. Another fact is that Paul Revere was my neighbor and wrote a letter for me to receive a pension from the Army. Sometime later, I married Benjamin Gannett and had 3 children. I also adopted a girl named Susan Shepard. Finally, in 1827, April 29th, I died due to old age. My remarkable accomplishments helped us women in many ways because it proved a woman can be intelligent and smart. And this is why I, Deborah Sampson Gannett, am still remembered today.
Hi, my name is Nathan Hale. I am still remembered today for my famous quote, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." I was a great spy and general under the Commander-in-Chief, George Washington, in the Revolutionary War. I carried out my orders faithfully, and the British put me on a hanging post for it. My hometown of Coventry, Connecticut, was on the eastern side of Connecticut. This was important because war was raging. Eastern Connecticut was made up of rebels, and the west side of Connecticut was loyal to the King of England. The East eventually won and shaped young minds like mine to hate the tyranny of the king. I was born on June 6, 1755, in Coventry, Connecticut. I was raised in the Puritan ways. My father was Richard Hale, and my mother was Elizabeth Hale, and I had an older brother named Enoch Hale. Little did I know that I would become a hero, a general, a patriot. I was not the only spy. There was a whole spy ring called the Culper Spy Ring. It included me, Benjamin Talmadge, Austin Ray, James Lafayette, Abraham Woodhull, Anna Strong, Robert Townsend, and Ann Bates. I was put in a New York encampment as a spy. When a battle began, I revealed my true identity to a man, and he turned on me. I was hanged 2 days later by the British. My death was tragic. The Connecticut militia mourned over me, and I was buried in New York. If it is one or many, I will be remembered forever. My last words and legacy still inspires great young minds in the past, now, and they will forever.
July 4th, 1776, America declares independence.
Across the globe and we're standing on your ground. Screaming across the waves, you can't hear a sound. No fair trials, no trade, no liberties, no tea. We colonized America, we won't stand for tyranny. Oh, King, and it's too late to apologize. It's too late. I said it's too late to apologize. It's too late. Pages full of stacks, read the acts, and it just won't do. We want to make it clear we believe this much is true. All men were created with certain unalienable rights, among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's too late to apologize. It's too late. I said it's too late to apologize. It's too late. It's too late to apologize. It's too late. I said it's too late to apologize. It's too late. It's too late to apologize. It's too late. I said it's too late to apologize. It's too late.
The War for the Independence began in 1775 and ended in 1783. Many brave people gave their lives so that Americans could be free.
As I mentioned earlier, I served in the American Revolutionary War under George Washington, the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Let me tell you a little bit more about George Washington, our fearless and determined leader. He not only served in the American Revolution for 6 years, but he also served in the French and Indian War, which lasted 9 years. An old Indian chief who fought against Washington said this about him as he noticed Washington was fired upon by many, but not one bullet harmed him. He is not of the Redcoat tribe. He has an Indian's wisdom. A mighty power has shielded him. The Great Spirit protects that man and guides his destinies. He will become the chief of nations, and a people yet unborn will hail him as the founder of an empire. Washington himself recalled to his mother, Mary Ball Washington, a few days after the battle that I luckily escaped without a wound, though I had 4 bullets through my coat and 2 horses shot under me. As we all know, Washington did go on to become a founding father and our nation's first president, but faced many difficulties along the way. When he took command of the Continental Army in 1775, they won many battles at first. However, in 1777, they faced defeat, and the tired and worn soldiers retreated to Valley Forge. The winter at Valley Forge was brutal, but Washington led his men with strength and humility, refusing to sleep in a cabin until there were enough for all his men. He cried out to God and Congress for help, lost thousands of soldiers, but never gave up. God answered his prayers when Germany and France joined as allies to the Americans. At the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, Washington devised a plan to trap the British army. He surrounded the British on land with the help of the German soldiers, while the French ships in Chesapeake Bay blocked the British ships, causing Lord Cornwallis to surrender. The wisdom of Washington led to a great victory for the colonists and the hope that the war would soon be over. Washington went on to serve 8 years as president. At Washington's funeral, Henry Lee used these unforgettable words to describe our first president. First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen.
Hello, I'm Alexander Hamilton, and I am remembered as one of the founding fathers of America. In the words of the Broadway musical, $10, founding father without a father. These words mean I'm on the $10 bill, and my father left me at a young age. I designed the modern-day banking system in America. As a young adult, I had many interesting experiences and opportunities. I was a student for King's College and a patriot as well. I later joined the Revolutionary Army and became an artillery captain. While I was a captain, I stole British cannons and cannonballs during the Revolutionary War. A couple of years later, George Washington offered me to be part of his staff, and I accepted and got promoted to lieutenant colonel. I was a major contributor in the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. Those are some of the experiences about my young adulthood. After the war, I was a very important person for America. I became a lawyer and later became the first person to run the Treasury Department. I wanted the 13 states to have a national bank. After a couple of years, I had a disagreement over Aaron Burr becoming the New York governor, and he challenged me to a duel, and I accepted. In 1801, Burr and I dueled, and Burr shot and killed me. In conclusion, I accomplished many good things. I was a major general after the Revolutionary War. I was the first Secretary of Treasury. I wrote letters for George Washington during the Revolutionary War. Those are just few of my accomplishments. Even though I lived a short life, I was an American leader who left a legacy.
Did you know Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity? I was also one of the founding fathers of the USA. I had many other talents, such as being good at science, reading, and writing. I discovered electricity by flying a kite in a thunderstorm with a key attached to the back. I was born on January 6, 1705 in Boston, Massachusetts, and I had 17 brothers and sisters altogether. In my family, we did not have that much money, so I only attended school for 2 years. Although I only attended school for 2 years, I was still very smart. In 1736, I co-founded the Union Fire Company, also known as the Bucket Brigade. This was the first ever volunteer fire company in the 13 colonies. I had some hobbies such as reading and writing. I also was a printer, a politician, and a hit writer at the age of 17. I had some more hobbies like building things like lightning rods or stoves. I also worked with Alexander Hamilton as a politician. Thomas Jefferson and I edited and drafted the Declaration of Independence. I had a very interesting life, and the stuff I built and discovered helped the world we live in today. This is why I could read about me, Benjamin Franklin, in many different history books.
Good job.
I am a remarkably interesting person. Do you know who I am? I'm the man who said, "I've not yet begun to fight." I am also the first person to raise a flag on an American warship, specifically a man of war. I was born in Bigland, Scotland, named John Paul. I was extremely interested in sailing, unlike my father, who was a gardener. I even got an apprenticeship with the British Merchant Marine. I started sailing to America and, like most people, got into the slave trade. The trading of human cargo repulsed me, though, so I switched back to trading normal cargo. Then I had to go to America because I had killed a mutinous sailor in self-defense, and I was afraid I would not receive a fair trial in Scotland. I changed my name to John Paul Jones to conceal my identity. When the American Revolution broke out, I sided with the American colonists because I had witnessed England's cruelty in Scotland. I traveled to France and was saluted by the French Admiral La Motte Piquet, the first U.S. vessel to be saluted by a foreign power. I finally took command of the USS Bonhomme Richard, poor Richard, and while in war, engaged with the British man of war Serapis and won. Since I did not have that many notable accomplishments, I will give you a detailed version of the most famous naval battle in history. When the Bonhomme Richard engaged with the Serapis, the British ship rammed me with 24-pound cannonballs. My ship started to sink, and one of my own officers tried to take down the flag. I responded by flinging a pistol at his head. The tide of the battle, not the actual tide, changed. One of my men threw a grenade into a cannon hatch of the Serapis and ignited a stack of gunpowder. Then my ship fired at the Serapis with everything it had. After 5 to 10 minutes of this, the British captain ran to the mast and took the flag off it and surrendered.
Well, my hands are too sweaty.
Who's that?
Sorry, I couldn't even snap.
Hi, I'm Martha Jefferson, and I'm here to tell you about my husband, Thomas Jefferson. Although Thomas Jefferson lived in the 18th century, his childhood paved the way for the most influential and successful men on the planet. Thomas Jefferson was born on April 13, 1743, in Shadwell, Virginia. He was born into a family that was closely related to some of the most prominent people living in Virginia. Thomas Jefferson and his mother's relationship was strained. People believe this because his father passed away. Jefferson's father was a self-educated surveyor, which is to survey a land. Unlike most kids, Thomas Jefferson wanted to go to school. He watched the founding of the University of Virginia. Thomas Jefferson's first memory was when he went on a 3-mile horseback ride with his dad's slave. Jefferson had 9 different hobbies. When he was a young adult, he kept himself busy by tending to mockingbirds, playing the violin, doing math, and learning astronomy. Thomas was a very ambitious person. As you can see, Jefferson kept himself busy as a young adult. Jefferson was a founding father and the 3rd president. He served as a minister to France. Jefferson established U.S. military. In conclusion,